This roasted vegetable tart would make a show-stopping addition to your holiday feast. It's got a delicious quinoa crust, which also happens to be gluten-free, and it features a rainbow of beautiful veggies layered and stacked with a savory white bean cream sauce. Whether you and your guests are plant-based or omnivore, everyone is going to want to dig into this dish. So let me show you how to make it step by step. Welcome friends. If you're new here, I'm Stephanie. I'm a whole food plant-based chef and cooking instructor, and I'll be making this roasted vegetable tart for my own Thanksgiving and Friendsgiving feast this year. So if you'd like to do the same, I'll show you how right now. As always, you can find the full written recipe in the description below this video. I'll be breaking this recipe down into 4 steps. Step 1 will be to make the quinoa crust, and you can skip this and buy a regular store-bought pie crust if you prefer. And then in step 2, I'll show you how to slice and pre-roast the veggies. In step 3, we'll make that savory white bean cream sauce, and in step 4, we'll put it all together and bake it. So let's get started. Step 1 is to make the quinoa crust, and for this you'll need a standard tart pan with a removable bottom. And as usual, you'll find my equipment notes in the description below this video as well. We'll be greasing the tart pan with just a little bit of a neutral flavored oil, and I like to use avocado oil for this. Once I've covered the bottom completely in the oil, then I will work it up the sides to grease those as well. Now this next step is optional, but I like to dust the inside of the oiled pan with a little bit of cornmeal. And the reason I do that is because it helps to release the tart from the pan even better once it's baked, but it also adds a really nice flavor element to the tart crust. So if you have some cornmeal, I highly recommend doing this. Then I will take the pan and give it a shake. And here's what it'll look like once it's dusted. And we'll set this aside for now, but just one more preliminary step. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit because we're going to be doing a pre-bake on this crust once we've got it spread out into the pan. In a small bowl, whisk together 2 heaping tablespoons of ground flaxseed with 1/3 cup of water. And then just set it aside to thicken. This will be our flax egg, which helps hold the structure of the crust. Put 2 cups of cooked quinoa into a large mixing bowl. Next, add a 1/2 cup of oat flour. Then add a 1/4 cup of almond flour. And then add a 1/2 teaspoon each of salt, garlic powder, and onion powder. And then mix this together well. Next, add the flax egg to the mixing bowl. And mix the flax into the dry mixture until it's thoroughly combined. Once it gets to the point where it starts to be a little bit difficult to work the rest of the dry ingredients in, then you'll start adding water, a few tablespoons at a time, and stir that in until the quinoa mixture forms a loose ball of dough that we can transfer to the tart pan. When it's ready, it'll look something like this. Now transfer the quinoa mixture to the prepared tart pan. And then wet your fingers so that the quinoa mixture won't stick to them, and gradually press the quinoa mixture flat into the entirety of the bottom of your prepared tart pan. Then once you feel like it's relatively even all the way across the bottom, you'll start to knead the dough from the center out toward the edges to make it a little higher. Keep turning the pan until you've made a complete circle. And then to better define the outer bottom edge of the tart crust, use your fingers to kind of push the dough into the corner very gently. And then this will be ready for a pre-bake, sometimes referred to as a blind bake. We'll put this in the oven at 350 for 15 minutes, and then you can take it out and set it aside. And here's what the quinoa crust will look like once it's been blind baked. Now you can do the crust step up to a few days before you make the rest of the recipe. Once you let the crust cool, you would just cover it in some plastic wrap and keep it in the fridge or even the freezer until you're ready to do the rest. We'll set this aside for now. Step 2 is to prepare and pre-roast the veggies. Today I'll be demonstrating with leeks, sweet potatoes, zucchini, red beets, some winter squash, butternut is a nice choice, and multicolored fingerling or mini potatoes. Feel free to choose your favorites from among these or even to add some different ones and experiment. You'll be slicing all of your veggies very thinly. I do this with a chef's knife, but if you have a mandolin or a food processor with a very thin shredding disc, those would make very quick work of a task like this. Trim away the hard ends of my sweet potato to begin, and I will slowly work my way down the vegetable, slicing basically as thin as you can make them. The little mini or fingerling potatoes will be quite a lot easier. Really thin slices. For the zucchini, it's the same principle. These can be a little bit thicker because zucchinis are mostly water and they will shrink quite a bit. We'll be working with the white and the light pale green section of the leeks here. Begin slicing at the root end. You want to work with the leeks gently so that they maintain this medallion shape. And I'll cut these into quarter rounds to go into the tart. And I like to slice the red beets last, otherwise their beet juice will stain the cutting board and kind of get all over everything else. And because beets are so dense, I usually cut this in half first, and I put the flat edge down and slice them into half moons. Spread your sliced veggies over your prepared baking sheets. It's okay if the veggies overlap a little bit so that they all fit. However, you want to make sure that enough air can circulate through the veggies so that they do actually roast rather than stacked up and steaming in their own moisture. I like to keep the lightest veggies on their own tray together, in this case the zucchini and the leeks, so that I can pull those out of the oven sooner, whereas the denser veggies I like to put on their own tray and they'll stay in the oven a little longer. Give all of your veggies a generous sprinkling of sea salt. Then we'll roast all the veggies for about 10 minutes at 425. Give them a flip with a spatula and return them to the oven for about 5 more minutes for the lighter veggies and for 10 more minutes for the densest ones. Step 3 is to whip up the savory cashew cream, and this one's pretty easy. We'll start by soaking raw cashews, about a quarter cup, in a heat-proof bowl, and we will cover them with hot water and set them aside to soak for about 15 minutes. Meanwhile, you'll mince the shallot and garlic, and then saute them lightly in just a teaspoon of avocado oil until they're slightly caramelized. And then to bring the sauce together, drain the cashews of their soaking water and transfer them to a blender. Then open a 14-ounce can of white beans. I've used Great Northern beans. Drain them, rinse them, and transfer them to a blender as well. Then you'll add the sauteed shallot and garlic. Then we'll add the fresh rosemary and thyme and a few fresh sage leaves, along with 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of nutritional yeast, a half a teaspoon of salt, quarter teaspoon of black pepper, and a generous dash of ground nutmeg. And I'll start with half a cup of vegetable broth or water, and I'll start blending this into a thick, creamy consistency. And in the final step, we'll assemble the tart. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, grab your pre-baked crust and your cashew white bean cream, and we'll spread a thin layer of the cream over the bottom of the tart crust. And now I've set up a workstation with the tart and the roasted vegetables, and I will begin alternating by color the roasted veggies, and I will lay them on the outer edge of the bottom of the tart, slightly overlap in an alternating color pattern. And once I've formed a ring all the way around the outer edge, then I'll start closer to the center and make another ring. Once we've got one full layer of veggies, we'll return to our cream sauce, put another layer of the cream on top of these veggies. And then once this layer of cream is fully spread, and we'll begin again with an additional layer of vegetables. Once we've got our second layer of veggies laid, then we'll do one more layer of the sauce, and then one final layer of vegetables on top, and this is the layer you'll want to try to make as pretty as possible, since this will be your final presentation. Isn't that beautiful? We'll just cover it with some aluminum foil, slide it in the oven at 400 degrees for 30 minutes, remove the foil, and then bake it again for another 25 to 30 minutes, and it'll be ready to serve. Once the tart has baked in the oven for 55 minutes to an hour, you'll need to let it cool just a little bit so that it will be safe enough to handle and remove from the pan. To do this, remove the outer ring of the tart pan first, and then very carefully slide a spatula between the bottom of the pan and the crust and work it around very, very carefully to release the crust from the pan, and then slide it gently over to a cutting board. From there, you can slice it up like a pie and serve it. This is such a treat. It really does stand alone as a main course because it's substantial. It's got the quinoa crust and the beans and the veggies, but it also really is nice as a side dish for a larger, more traditional holiday feast that everyone can enjoy, whether they're plant-based or omnivore. It truly is a crowd pleaser. It is so delicious. I hope that you and your people will love this as much as we do here. If you've been inspired by this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel because I've got a whole lot more whole food plant-based goodness coming up, and I would love to see you again for the next one. Again, I'm Stephanie of Green Sage, wishing you good health and delicious food, and happy holidays. See you again in the next one.